The feast of our local saint brings back fond memories, for at a very happy moment just after ordination I was living in the very house that he had lived in. It had been the Irish College and is now the Convita of the Angelicum, and we would be vesting for Holy Mass in the sacristy before the portrait of him, reminding us of those who had gone before us. The sacristy right now would be roughly where the refectory would have been when he was there, but it was the same building. And the proof of that is to be seen in the old name of the alley that leads up to it, Viale degli Ibernesi. That would be the old way of describing the Irish. So there he was. He was educated there in that Irish college in Rome. And after his ordination, he was unable to return to Ireland because of the Cromwellian persecution. And we know what that means in this area. Drogheda was made an example of. He remained in Rome, therefore, for 15 years as a young priest, and there his talent came out as a great defender of the Church, the first of the fathers in lectures. He was very well educated and able to transmit the message in his teaching, and therefore he was picked up for what he was by those around him. And it's not surprising that eventually whispers came that he was worthy of being made not just a bishop, but the bishop for Ireland, because taking him there back to Ireland, there was a hope that the whole of the hierarchy would be re-established. Therefore, to have a man at the top as primate would be a key position and a key moment. Alas, it was not to happen. It was in 1669 that he was therefore, first of all, named as bishop, but he wasn't ordained in Rome. And there's a reason for that. They were doing everything under the radar, and they tried to make as little noise about it as possible, so the papal authorities arranged that he would be ordained en route, and he was ordained in the Low Countries by, I forget which bishop, but it happened therefore that between Rome and Ireland he changed entity from priest to archbishop, and therefore they had to be very discreet about his movements, which did not impede him when he got back to really go to work about trying to re-establish order in the chaotic situation of a bishopless Ireland practically. We must remember that only he as bishop could confirm children. That was how it was done in those days. The priest has in himself the possibility of confirming, but those powers are bound, and they cannot be unbound unless the Church unbinds them. In the Eastern Church, all parish priests have those powers unbound because they confer chrismation, as it's called there, at baptism. In the West, a parish priest has them automatically unbound without recourse at the deathbed of a child who is dying, because one confirms a dying child. A person who receives a non-Catholic into the church and gives him baptism also has the power to confirm at that point. But normally a priest has those powers bound, and all priests at the time had them bound, and therefore this bishop was spending hours and hours and hours confirming thousands and thousands of children, not only in the Armagh diocese, already huge, but also in other dioceses which were vacant all around. And he was ordaining young priests left, right and centre. So his bishopric hands were full of grace, and also the power of his word was important. and he was open-minded in setting up centres of education where both Protestants and Catholics would be given good human teaching, and even young priests would be attending them. Very much avant-garde, therefore, at the time, and a sign for our times with regard to open-mindedness. And it was working. But something went hugely wrong. We had thought that at the time, and we're going now into the mid-1600s, or even further on in time by this stage, that it was pretty well over with regard to bloodshed. It was not to be. There was an upsurge of very violent hostility to Catholics in the wake of the strange series of events linked with Titus Oates. And it was thought that the Catholics were up to something which would involve continental powers, that there would be a political upheaval. And the authorities in England, badly informed of course, were going to be very radical about stopping any possibility of the sort. And so therefore, as late as 1681, we have this still going on. And we know the details of what happened. They tried him in Dundalk, but the local area was too favourable to him, and so they took him out of his context altogether. And there he had a very severe imprisonment in the most severe prison of all, Newgate, and we have the door of that prison still venerated locally in St Peter's, where he was extremely unpleasantly kept in custody for 8 months. Awful from what I can pick up from the details which have come down to us. And then this mock trial, in which deliberately they wouldn't allow enough time for his true witnesses to come and defend him, and used these useful bits of men of the cloth who were traitors, and under perjury certainly trying to get their own back because he'd been severe, that is to say correct, in correcting them for their misbehaviour and so on. And this was the kind of witness that they had. And it was a miscarriage of justice. And he knew exactly what was going on and wrote calmly about it to the Pope. Here we have actually what he wrote. Sentence of death was passed against me on the 15th. It has not caused me the least terror or deprived me of even a quarter of an hour's sleep. I am as innocent of all treason as the child born yesterday. As for my character, profession and function, I did own it publicly, and that being also a motive of my death, I die most willingly. On he goes. And this calm, almost quaint attitude is typical of the martyrs of the time. Notice this twinkle in the corner of his eye. He talks about what's going on in Scotland. There, Parliament has decreed for the future it will be a Lese Majesty to hear Mass. It seems as if the times of Nero, Domitian and Diocletian have come round again. We shall have martyrs' blood to irrigate and fertilise the Church. These edicts, he says at this point, do not at present include Ireland, because it is not named by the King in them. But I am sure that, as usual, we shall not be forgotten. It reminds me of St Thomas More, who was actually at the other end of the army. You will remember that he was just after the first ones of all, the Carthusian martyrs, there in the Tower of London, and he saw them go. Here we're in 1435 or so, and he said to his daughter, look how they go. They were going on this hurdle, boom, 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 through the streets up to the Tyburn Hill, behind horses dragged. Look how they go, Meg, like bridegrooms to the wedding. And he and Bishop John Fisher were soon to follow. Actually, the feast of John Fisher was the other day. It was in June that he was sent to his... Now, what was it? The punishment was that of Lese Majesty. therefore it was atrocious. And the details of how it was done is almost irrepeatable. They were hanged, but brought back to life before dying, cut down from the rope, and then they were opened by a knife and all the entrails came out. The genitals were taken and all that, and they were still alive, and the heart was the last to go. And the executioner would hold up the beating heart. "Behold the hand of a traitor!" And they all had to reply, God, or say, or actually I think it was "Long live the king." I think that was the correct response, as though it was a ritual. Now, with regard to Thomas More, he would have had that, but a message came at the last moment that it was not going to be that, but beheading. Because, and the reason was this, you are a friend of the king, he will give you this favour. And he calmly replied, "Heaven preserve friends of the king from such a favour." And then when he got to the gallows, or rather, in his case, the block, and by the way, the block was, in a sense, harder than the guillotine, because a lot depended on the aim of those involved, the axe. Well, he just calmly spoke to the executioner and said, "Good sir, look to thy reputation. My neck is short and my beard is long. Take thought of my beard, for it hath done none harm." And he went, the twinkle in his eye, to the glory of the resurrection. The head of Oliver Plunkett we have, and we venerated it this morning. Looking right into its eyes and teeth, I could see this is a miracle. It's not a skull. It's just as though it's after the moment of death, or in the moment of death. Because if one looks into it, one sees the moment of atrocious pain and a man doing his utmost to bear it. It's there in the look of the mouth. But there is also a dignity about it. One can see it's a person somehow as Christ on the cross, with dignity, enduring the maximum and knowing that he's in a good place. In school days, I used to go to another St Peter's church, for the church in Rwanda is that of St Peter. It was nearly opposite the girls' school, and there, in those days, they were still looking for altar boys, because they didn't have conciliation coming in as early as that. It was coming in bit by bit, and so all these masses were going on, and so I used to serve mass at the Lady Chapel on the left, but on the high altar, and then behind it was this scene of our Lord preaching in the bark of Peter. But as I came into church every morning, I put my bike there, because the parish priest said leave it there, and right before me, before I went into the church itself, were these 4 stained glass windows of the martyrdom of 2 saints from Cardiff, St John Lloyd and St David Lewis, I think. Certainly Philip Evans and John Lloyd. David Lewis was another one of the 6 Welsh martyrs of the 40 of England and Wales. It was John Roberts and him who were there, Philip Evans, and they were martyred not far from our school. If one went up that road there, which was near it, went further up, one got to the bank, National Provincial Bank, and that was called Gallows Hill way back, and it's exactly at that spot that they were hanged, drawn and quartered. But the interesting thing was this: the windows of the martyrdom in that church captured exactly the mood. It was atrocious pain, but they too had the twinkle in their eye. And it shows this interesting moment, which is very Jesuitical actually. They were passing their time in the prison. The sentence had already been given, so they knew they were in for it, for this gentle treatment, but they were perfectly calm. And they were passing the time playing a game of some kind of tennis that they had invented that they could play in the confines of their cell. There they were, and the call came, and it's written there on the stained glass window, the call. So the person is coming into the cell on behalf of the authorities. Your time is up. They were to go to the gallows. And they calmly answered, could we just finish this game, please? And they let them. Which is actually exactly what they should do. Because the Jesuits tell us, if you are told you have to die in half an hour, and you are playing a game, what must you do? You must finish the game. The reason is this, it's a profound reason. If one is living in the will of God, one's duty at that moment is to do well what one is doing. Remember that before wasting even a simple act. All the things who from their neighbors rest, worthy by faith before the world confess. The name of Jesus be forever blessed. Alleluia.